Hello there YouTube. So, this is my media plan for 2022 and a kind of look forward to the next year. I am hoping to make a couple of changes to the way I run my channel, as most people say at the end of the year, just because I want to try to have a little bit more structure. I've enjoyed what I've been doing on YouTube for the last year or so. It's been a lot of fun. It's been interesting to debate books, and I've enjoyed getting into a couple of political issues. Though I don't want to make this an overtly political channel, I do feel the issues I was talking about have been very important. But I want to focus more on actual media. So I've come up with a list of media that I want to tackle over the next few months. In fact, I've pretty much planned out all of 2022. And I've got a list of books that make up my TBR for the year. I've kept it fairly reasonable. I've tried to keep it to 2 books per month, because I think that's very much within my grasp at the moment. I've been reading a lot faster the last couple of weeks. I've been able to dedicate more time to reading, which is very nice. If I can read more than 2 books in a month, I will do. But I don't want to promise that, because I find that I heavily overestimate what I can do with my time. I will plan for something, and then I simply won't be able to keep to it. I double book myself, I triple book myself, I often overestimate how much energy I've got. And I need to remember that, first of all, I have a chronic fatigue disorder. Second of all, I have a chronic pain disorder, which means I'm often not in the mood to read or record videos or anything like that. Third, I have severe migraines, which can steal entire weeks from me. Half of December was just taken away from me because I had 5 migraines in quick succession, which meant that I had about 15 days of constant migraines. That was unforeseeable. And it's left me in a situation where, even though the readathon that I ran on my Discord ended at the beginning of December, I still haven't officially announced the results. Because I was in a position where, as it was ending, I started my migraines. I spent 2 weeks solidly in migraines, only having maybe a day or 2 where I could recoup some time for myself, and I spent most of that time trying to run my tabletop games. So I had no time to go through anything. And then obviously in the latter half of the month I had family visiting and we were doing Christmas stuff. So I've been very limited in what free time I've had to do anything really. So another thing I do, of course, is I run my tabletop role-playing games. Now that means, for me, I've got a World of Darkness game and 2 D&D games a week. That's a lot of time I spend on that. It's a hobby I very much enjoy, and it's one that I'm actively engaging with the community on the Discord with. But I have to accept that takes at least 12 hours a week out of my free time, because I run around a 4 to 5 hour game session each time. It's probably much closer to 20 hours out of my free time, because I likely spend closer to 5 to 6 hours if I add in stoppage time and things like that, and that's not accounting for any prep. Obviously I prep my games as well, so you can possibly double that, at which point it's starting to become a full-time job. Like, if you double it to 40 hours a week, that's a full-time job. So I spend way more time than I perhaps should on those tabletop games. I may roll them back to only 2 a week when certain campaigns end. I haven't decided how I'm gonna play this out, but I need to be prepared for the fact that I can't be running this many games and still doing all the things I want to do. So I'm gonna think ahead. Now, there are other things I like to do. I like to go to the cinema. I like to play video games. I would like, in the next year, to spend a lot more time at the gym, because I really do need to lose weight. My health is a big concern. So, for me to spend a lot of time on Booktube, and for me to spend a lot of time reading, I need to prioritise. I need to make sure that I'm doing what I really want to do with books and reading. So, what I've got set up is I have one classic read and one modern read per month, and I'm going to do them as a big focus. Each book that I'm going to read, I'm going to spend time focusing on them. I'm going to jump between just those two reads. So I'm going to jump between my classic and my modern, depending on my mood. And each month I am going to review both of these reads and potentially do something more with them, because a lot of them I've picked specifically because I have either already got one or plan to get a special edition version of these books. For many of them I've got leather-bound copies, and for a few of them I even have Folio Society copies, which I recently got as Christmas presents. So these are books that I not just want to read and talk about the content, but I also want to showcase these collectible editions on the channel as additional video content that you can have a look through, that people can go, oh, do I want to buy that collector's edition? Something else to give the channel a little bit more meat to its bones. And it's still bookish related, so I'm sure that someone will find that useful. They'll just be short, maybe 5-minute videos, camera pointed at the book while I go through, show off some of the illustrations, the quality of the binding, that kind of thing. I'm going to go through each month and explain what I'm planning on reading, and maybe give a minute or so to describe why I've picked these books. For January, I'm going to start with my classic read being Wuthering Heights. Now, this I picked because I am following the Hardcore Literary Book Club on YouTube. Now, I'm not following all of the pay-gated content because it's too expensive. I do not have the money that they want for me to be able to spend on unlocking basically a YouTube video and essays on books that I'm going to have to read myself and buy myself. I think the lowest price, just entry, was something like £19 a month, which is a hell of a lot to subscribe to what is basically a YouTube lecture and book club series. It's way too much. Like, if I get that what he's trying to do is run here is an Oxbridge level analysis education in literature that you can study in your own time, and given that he went to a big red brick university, I believe he said he went to Oxford. The guy's running this, whose channel I'm going to link here, but the channel name I cannot remember off the top of my head, so I'm not going to waste time trying, but I'm going to link to that there. Because he's actually got that education, if he's using his education, he kind of wants to recoup something from it, and I can understand that. Like, if I had spent all of that time at an expensive, prestigious university, I'd want some returns on my investment there. And I suppose it's a way for him to use his knowledge of literature. It does sometimes come across a bit pretentious, but it always does when these literary fiction types, these red brick uni types, all talk about books. They always talk about it in a way that makes the average person feel stupid and not included. So that bothers me a little. I want to read some of these classics, but I want to read them from the perspective of the everyman. And I'm not the everyman. I went to multiple universities. I'm very educated. I'm just not educated in literature. I'm educated in STEM fields. So when it comes to this topic, I get very, very annoyed because it feels like there's a lot of navel gazing, there's a lot of pretension, there's a lot of people looking down on other people for the way they read and the things they read, and I hate that. So I'm hoping that I can address that a little bit by approaching some of these classics and reading them with an open mind, but also without assuming that they're classics, therefore they're better. I don't believe that. I don't believe that, say, War and Peace is necessarily better than Game of Thrones. More people are likely to say that in literary circles, but my understanding is that War and Peace and A Game of Thrones are two very similar books in structure. They have a lot of politics, they have a lot of infighting, a lot of manipulation between characters and a big cast of characters. The difference is one of them is based in the real world and one of them is based in a fantasy world with magic and dragons. And maybe I'm just a bit too basic here, but doesn't the second sound more interesting? Now, maybe it's not. Maybe the first is more interesting, but you need to read both before you can tell, and I get the distinct impression the literary types who read either, they'll often look at any kind of speculative fiction and just poo-poo it as not worth the time. That's genre fiction. Fuck off. I hate that. But yeah, that's why I want to read some of these classics, so I can have a decent backing to make these criticisms. Because the problem I've got is my reading history, my background in literature is too limited. I haven't read enough to be able to make proper criticisms and proper leaps of logic. So I'm going to read Wuthering Heights in January, because that is what the Hardcore Literary Book Club is reading in January. And whilst I'm not following all of their videos, I am following what's available free on their channels. What the channel I linked is doing, I'm following that at least, and I'm going to try to involve myself in the discussion in the YouTube comment section there. At the very least, if people are reading that, they're reading the same book as me, so maybe they'll want to jump in our Discord and discuss it with us. You never know. It's good to have multiple communities reading the same books, because then those communities can interweave and they can talk amongst themselves. For the modern read, I want to go with The Hod King. Now, this is a book I've mentioned a few times on my channel, because this is the third book in the Books of Babel series. And the reason I want to read The Hod King in January is because I couldn't read it in the last year. I tried reading it, and like I say, December screwed me over. I had 15 days of just near constant migraines. So I was screwed. I wasn't able to read what I wanted to read. The Hod King has sat there like, defiantly unread for 2 months for me. And it's really just been that things have got in the way. And I hate that. I really hate that. So yeah, The Hod King is my modern read. Now this is one of the problems that I've got with a lot of booktube channels, is that if they're reading books that aren't the first in the series, other people can't really join in. So I'm trying to keep myself from doing that. The Hod King is an exception to this rule, because I want to finish the Books of Babel series. So I am going to make exceptions for that series, but only that series. Everything else that I'm planning to read is either standalone or the beginning of a series, which I think is a good move. I think that will make it so that other people can join in. So, on to February. For February, the classic read, I'm following the Hardcore Literary Book Club again, and we're going to read Moby Dick. Now, Moby Dick is going to be interesting for me because I have a leather-bound version of it, quite a nice edition of it. So I'm going to read from that. I would have liked to have done the same thing with Wuthering Heights. I have a leather-bound version of the Bronte sisters' work that is coming to me, but it doesn't release until February. So I will review that, but I'll review it in February. For my modern read, I'm going to read Recursion, which is the other book that I've been talking about the last 2 months that I've not got to. It's actually right here, because it was actually one that I was planning on reading as soon as I finished my recent read, but I forgot that The Hod King is what I planned for January, because I want to try and mix and match. With Moby Dick being a far larger book than Wuthering Heights, I want to pick the shorter of the modern reads to read alongside Moby Dick. So Recursion was going to be my next read, but I have moved it to February. Now I may read these a little faster, but the content will come out in these months. So if I do finish The Hod King early, I may well jump into Recursion at the end of January. That could happen. And if it does, great. It's not going to make any difference to the channel because I'm still going to discuss it and review it in February. So, hopefully, we can keep the conversation going. I can still discuss it in Discord if people are discussing it. It doesn't matter if I read ahead. What matters is if I fall behind. So if I can read ahead, I will read ahead a little. Simply because I want to make sure that I can justifiably finish the books I'm putting down here. March is going to be interesting. March, we're deviating from where the Literary Book Club is going. We're going to read, for our classic read, Something Wicked This Way Comes by Ray Bradbury. Now, I did a poll in the summer of last year on which authors people would like me to read and cover on the channel, and Ray Bradbury won. And since then, I have read Fahrenheit 451, and I've barely spoken about it, which is annoying, because I wanted to actually use the poll as a jumping off point. I want to use it as a barometer for what interest there is in certain books in my audience, and I've just not been able to really follow up on it. So this is the first chance I've got to throw in a book by Ray Bradbury that I think people will be interested to hear my take on. Also, Something Wicked This Way Comes is one of 3 books that I currently have the Folio Society Collector's Edition of. And it's a gorgeous book. I look forward to reading from it. I look forward to showing it off and giving a product review as well as a literary review of that book. For the modern read, I'm going to go with a reread. And this is honestly an excuse to read a very specific book. I have the Folio Society Collector's Edition as a Christmas present for my parents. I have the Folio Society version of A Game of Thrones. So I want to reread A Game of Thrones. It's been a long time. I want to read it with fresh eyes. I want to read it now, having seen the TV show and knowing where that's gone. I can put that out of my mind and I can go back to the book. And I want to do that. I want to read the book for the book's sake, and I just want to focus on just A Game of Thrones, just the first book. So that's going to be my modern read. I'm also going to go over that Folio Society book as well, and discuss my thoughts and feelings on A Game of Thrones, which is one of my favourite books of all time. I think that's going to be a lot of fun. So that's March, A Game of Thrones and Something Wicked This Way Comes. It's going to be a luxurious month for me. I'm going to be reading from only Folio Society books, which feels quite extravagant. Being able to read from these really expensive, really well-made, like I say, luxurious books, fully illustrated with these cloth-bound covers, really nice tactile feel, really thick, heavy paper. They're lovely books. Anyway, moving on to April. Now, this is where we're not going to stick to 2 books, because, well, I say I'm not going to stick to 2 books. Technically speaking, the classic reads that I'm doing here are all 1 book, in that I'm physically holding a book. Technically, Game of Thrones is 2 volumes, so you could argue that's 2 books, but that's not the point. So I am straining the definition of book here. But for April, I'm going to do the Jules Verne collection. I have the Canterbury Classics leather-bound Jules Verne collection. It has 4 Jules Verne novels in it, and I'm going to read at least 3 of them, possibly all 4, because I'm not sure about one of them. It's one that I'm not familiar with. The other 3 I'm very familiar with and really enjoy. So I want to read all of those. The thing is, when I say I'm very familiar with them, I read them as a teenager. I'm 35 now. I will be 36 when I'm reading this, which will mean that it will have been more than 20 years since I read Jules Verne. So I don't know how I feel about Jules Verne now. It's been so long, I genuinely don't know how I feel about his writing. So I want to go back and I want to decide as an adult what this stuff means to me. April is also the time when the Literary Book Club is doing a read of Blood Meridian by Cormac McCarthy. So I'm going to do the same, but not just Blood Meridian. April is going to be the Cormac McCarthy Deep Dive. Jules Verne's collection is not that long, even though it's got 4 novels in it. It's still smaller than some of the fantasy books that I would normally read. It's still only around 600, maybe 700 pages for all the books included. So I feel no issue in saying, you know what, I could bash out the Jules Verne collection as in a week and a half, and then have the rest of April to do a deep dive on Cormac McCarthy. I want to read Blood Meridian, I want to read Child of God, I want to read The Road. Those 3 are what I'm focusing on. I want to do a full kind of breakdown of Cormac McCarthy, especially because the more I learn about Cormac McCarthy, the more I want to know how I feel about him. I know he's got a reputation for being a right-wing literary figure. A lot of right-wingers like his books. I know he has a reputation of being kind of a dude bro reader. Like a dude bro read. Like all of these like minimalist young boys who read Marcus Aurelius's philosophies, and they worship Stoicism and all that. In between, talking about pipe smoking and getting extracting value from books and all that nonsense. You know the kinds of people we're talking about. The kind of people who view reading as personal investment and extracting knowledge and things like that. Those guys, they seem to love Cormac McCarthy. I'm not sure why. Then there's Steve Donoghue, who has railed against Cormac McCarthy as a waste of time. Thing is, Steve Donoghue has done something that pisses me off here. Now, I don't dispute what he's saying yet, because I haven't read the books. Maybe they are less valid. But the way he talks about them makes me very uncomfortable, because it's pretentious and gatekeeping in a way that I don't like. It just doesn't sit well with me. He describes Cormac McCarthy's books as being not really reading, which first of all is a big red flag. You don't get to decide what is and isn't reading. If you're opening a book and looking at words and translating them in your head, you're reading. That's what reading is. You don't get to decide which genres no longer count as reading. He's compared them to video games, and that comparison is decidedly negative in Steve Donoghue's mind, which I will just like to say a giant fuck you, Steve, to that. Video games are not your punching bag. Stop it now. You have no concept of what is good and not good in video games. It is a medium you have no knowledge of, you have no experience in. Do not insult other people's mediums when you don't like it being done to yours. Think about that. Video games are a very detailed and very deep art form that you have no experience with. So shut the fuck up. So yeah. Steve Donoghue has railed against this. He's compared Cormac McCarthy's books to video games. He's also compared them to hardcore drugs, saying that that they don't count as reading. You're not using your brain. You're just using the pleasure centers. You're having an experience. You're not reading anything, you're not consuming literature, you're just having a drug hit. It's like, fuck off. No, you're reading words on a page. Clearly, the only person who could say that is someone who's never actually experienced a drug hit. Steve Donoghue, by the way, is one of the best booktubers that you can follow. His videos are endlessly entertaining. He's one of the few booktubers where I can honestly say I will sit there and watch a 45-minute video of him talking about fucking nothing, because he is genuinely interesting and entertaining to watch. But at the same point, some of his hot takes are rage-inducingly stupid. Others are really, really good, and I thoroughly enjoy them, and I'm glad that he speaks out on some issues. But others he does parade his pretentiousness a little, and he seems to think that he is a step above when it comes to his opinions, and this pushes out into other topics. He may be a very well-read man, and he may be very experienced in some areas, but he pushes that experience too far, and he acts like he's an expert in areas when he clearly isn't, which doesn't sit well with me. May. So that's the Cormac McCarthy deep dive anyway. I need to do this. I need to know what the big deal of Cormac McCarthy is, because there's so much that there could be to this man. Like I've also heard the way he doesn't use punctuation, and that drives me crazy. Like that to me is like modern art in book form. Modern art is just someone making crap and acting like a pretentious douche over it. And I question whether or not avoiding using proper sentence structure and proper punctuation is not Cormac McCarthy doing the same thing. It certainly sounds like it, and it makes me concerned. I've got 4 of his novels sitting there, and I want to read them, and I want to know that they're not going to be a waste of my bloody time. So yeah, that's April anyway. May I may have bitten off a little bit more than I can chew. For my classic read, I'm going to do the same thing I did with Jules Verne. And I'm going to read my leatherbound collection of Robert Louis Stevenson. Robert Louis Stevenson is an interesting figure in classic literature. We've got a couple of famous stories there with Treasure Island and Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. There's a few others in that book that I'm not familiar with, but again, this is one that I read as a teenager, and one that I really want to go back to, because there's stuff there that I want to revisit as an adult. I want to see what I think of it. I want to see if it still holds up for an adult reading. These are classics for a reason, so they're not going to be bad, but I want to get a good feel for it. Now, those are going to be fairly light reading, I suspect. So, for May, my modern read, and this I'm going to be reading from the paperbacks, but if I like them, I intend to potentially get the folio collection. And that is Book of the New Sun. Yeah, I know. That's a big ask. Book of the New Sun is technically a series of 4 books, but they're all really short. And I think that I can read all of them in 1 month, because I've got the paperbacks of books 1 through 4, and they're so short that books 1 and 2 are in one volume, books 3 and 4 are in another volume, and they're still not that big of a volume. Like, Moby Dick is bigger than both of these volumes. Like, Game of Thrones is bigger than both of these volumes. Both combined, all 4 of these books combined, is smaller than The Way of Kings. So this is entirely doable. This is easily something I could actually read. And I think it's going to be a good read. I think it's going to be an interesting read. There's so much that Book of the New Sun apparently does, and I don't know how they do it in such a limited page number. Like, there are so few pages to do all the things that Book of the New Sun apparently does. So I want to see for myself whether it lives up to the expectations and lives up to the reputation that the series has got. So yeah, that's my plan for May. On to June. June, I wanted to move away from fantasy, at least a little bit, because I'll have read at least a little bit of fantasy in May. Yes, Book of the New Sun is fantasy; it's not sci-fi. From what I've heard, it manages to like creep into the sci-fi because they set it in the far future, but the entire structure and styling of the book is fantasy, so it's fucking fantasy, right? And I've been reading, A Game of Thrones in March, and Jules Verne doesn't really feel like sci-fi anymore. It feels more like historical fantasy, like alternate history fantasy. back for April. So, and I want to go for something a bit more hard sci-fi. So for June, we're going to go and read the Foundation trilogy. Now, I read the first Foundation book this year, but I never went further than that. And that's annoying, because I have all of them as small little paperbacks. But this year, I managed to get hold of the Foundation trilogy as a leather-bound version with all 3 books in one nice leather-bound volume. So I'm going to read from that. It's a really nice looking book, so I'm excited to read from it. But it's also a series that I've heard a lot from. I know a lot of the details from. I'm sure I read this when I was in uni, but I can only remember bits of it. And I only managed to read through the first Foundation book this year. So what I remember of it is sketchy and piecemeal. I'm not sure if I actually ever really read it, or if I just discussed it or saw some kind of adaptation of it. I'm not sure if there is an adaptation. Was there a film, maybe? But I know enough about stuff that happens in the Foundation trilogy that I must have got from somewhere. And I don't remember ever reading the full trilogy. So it'll be fun to go into that and read a bit deeper into that. Then for the modern read, I'm going to finish off the Books of Babel series with The Fall of Babel. Now, I have that as an ebook, but I've purposely waited till June because I want the paperback so it matches my other the rest of my collection. I have all 3 of the other books on paperback. So I'm waiting for that to release as a physical book so I don't have to read the ebook. But if it's still not out by June, I'll just read the ebook. That's fine. I have a tablet. There's no reason that can't be done. So I'm okay with that. Next, we've got July. And in July, I am again possibly biting off way more than I can chew. Because I am putting something on here that I tried to read again this year that is a big ask. That is a lot of time investment, and that might be my undoing. For the classic read, I've got The Master and Margarita, which again is one that there is a really nice Folio Society edition of. I have a paperback version. I'm going to read the paperback. If I really love it, I will then consider getting the Folio Society edition for what will be a growing leather-bound and cloth-bound classics and favourites collection. So that is one that I'm considering getting the folio book for. If I do, I'll be reviewing the folio book and actually showing that off. But I want to read it first. I don't want to just get the Folio Society book. I might hate the book. So I want to make sure that this is something that I genuinely do love. For the modern read, though, this is where I'm biting off a hell of a lot more than I can chew. The First Law trilogy. The whole trilogy. I'm not just going to read The Blade itself, because every single person I speak to on this says that the First Law trilogy isn't 3 books. It's not a trilogy. It's one big book. It's one complete story, and really you should read one after the other. Every single person agrees. First Law is one story, so read all 3. Because you won't really get a sense of what you feel of it until you finish the 3rd book. So I should listen to that, and I should actually read all 3. So I'm going to read all 3. Now, I've looked into this. They are, on average, around 650 pages. The first book is on the smaller side, the 3rd book is on the larger side out of the 3. But, at my current reading speed, I am reading around 120 pages a day, which is fine. Now, I'm going to assume that I'm only going to read at 2/3 speed for these books, because they are new books that I've not read before. They are adult fantasy, so there's more world building, there's more there's more made-up words, there's going to be more complex sentence structure, it's going to be slower to read. So let's assume I'm only going to get through about 80 pages a day. This means that each of those books will take me around 8 days to read, based on how many pages I'd be reading per day. If that's the case, I can get through them in 24 days, giving me a week to read The Master and Margarita. This is doable. This is entirely doable in my current reading schedule, with my current reading speed and the amount of time I devote to reading. If I add an extra half hour a day reading, I will easily be able to read the First Law Trilogy and Master and Margarita in 1 month without any delays. This will only work if I actually keep to it, which is why I've placed it in July, because that gives me enough time to build these routines and reliably get into the habit of always reading for the full 2 hours in the morning, getting maybe a little bit of extra reading in the evenings, trying to make this into not just something I enjoy doing, but an automatic habit. And I need to have July work in my benefit here. July needs to not screw me over. If I start getting migraines in July, I'm screwed. I'm not going to manage it. So I'm going to say now that this is tentative. All of these books could get thrown by the wayside simply because I could end up being ill for a week or two, and then that's going to throw off my entire schedule. So I'm going to try to keep to this, but I'm not making any definite promises. But I do genuinely want to do this. So that is my plan for July. August. August, for the classic read, I've put... This is the most recent book I've put in the classic read, by the way, but I don't think anyone's going to complain that this isn't a classic and influential sci-fi book. That's Dune. Again, I've got a really nice leather-bound version of Dune that I want to read from. And then for modern reads, I'm going to go back to something that I read back in 2020, but I got about halfway through and then stopped reading. And it was because I was in a really bad headspace. I was struggling with depression at the time, and the book wasn't having the impact I wanted it to have on me. I could tell that it was a good book, but I wasn't enjoying it because my emotional state wasn't right for it. So I went, you know what, I'm going to put this aside and I'm going to come back to this another time. And it's been so long that I want to go back to it and actually enjoy it properly. So that book is The Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss. I'm hoping that by August I'll be able to start this and say that we've got a date set for Doors of Stone. Because if that's the case, that will make me very, very excited to continue on with this. I think that Patrick Rothfuss actually might give us a date in 2022 for the third book in his trilogy. Unlike George R. R. Martin, I genuinely believe Patrick Rothfuss is working on his book. I think he genuinely is putting something together. Whereas I think George R. R. Martin has lost the will to continue writing A Song of Ice and Fire. But that's okay. I think the first 3 books of A Song of Ice and Fire are fantastic as a trilogy, and I would be happy with just them. If he never finishes it, that's fine, but let's hope he does. Anyway, that's my plan for August. For September, I have another Folio Society book here. I got the Folio Society version of George Orwell's 1984. So that's going to be my classic read for September. And to contrast what is going to be a politically charged and quite dark book, something that's going to likely spark political discussion, I wanted something a little bit more light-hearted. And I have a really nice bind-up of all 3 of these books as one volume, and that is His Dark Materials. So I'm going to read His Dark Materials in September. I have it as one bind-up. Yes, it's 3 books, but they're relatively short compared to some of the other books I'm reading over this year, and they are YA children's teen books, so they should be a much easier read. It's going to be like reading The Hunger Games for when it comes to complexity and structure. So I suspect I'll be able to read them relatively fast. I could easily read one of the Hunger Games books in 3 to 4 days if I wanted to. Mockingjay literally took me 3 days to read. Well, technically 4 days. It would have taken me 3 days if I had read those last 30 pages on the last day. But I was feeling tired and decided to put it off to the following morning. But I could have easily read Mockingjay in 3 days. I suspect I could do the same thing with all 3 of the His Dark Materials books. So they're not going to be a big challenge. 2 weeks I can read them quite comfortably. It's not like the First Law trilogy, which is much bigger and much more in depth. But His Dark Materials is one that I'm excited to read through. I know what Philip Pullman's politics is like. He wrote it as the anti-Narnia, as an atheist fantasy. So I'll be interested to see what I make of this. And give His Dark Materials a big analytical reread. For October, I've got, for my classic read, my leather-bound collection of H.P. Lovecraft. Because it is spooky season after all, so some H.P. Lovecraft is necessary, I think. I'm also going to put as my modern read someone who I've never read before. This is one of the few books that I don't have a collector's edition of. I have some quite nice looking mass market paperbacks that I like the design of, and that's my Clive Barker books. I have never read any Clive Barker, so I'm going to read Clive Barker's Weave World as my modern read for October. I think that'll be nice. I may also read a couple of others. I am tempted. I was going to read this in the next couple of days, actually, because it's only a little over 200 pages, but I have Clive Barker's Cabal here. It's tiny. So I was considering maybe giving this a read now, but I may save this until October, because Lovecraft is not going to take a lot of time. Most of his stories are short stories. So I'd have just Weave World as my main read. I may try and squeeze Cabal in as well. So yeah, that's a thing I may focus on, and get a couple of Clive Barkers in. I may use the next couple of days to quickly squeeze a Cormac McCarthy book in, actually, because I've got a fair few of his books, so I may try reading Child of God in the next few days, just to get a taster of what Cormac McCarthy's like, and then I can read Blood Meridian and The Road more slowly and more contemplatively over the April. So, November, I'm going to keep up a little bit of the horror thing, because it always bothers me that that November turns around and suddenly spooky season ends immediately. Like, spooky season shouldn't just end because October is finished. Like, Halloween is the last day of October. I still have spooky season vibes for a lot of November. So I want to read a Stephen King, because Stephen King is one of my favourite authors. And I'm going to read Stephen King's The Shining. And depending on how I feel, I am genuinely tempted to go ahead and get the Folio Society version of The Shining, because I would like to have one big, like, showcase book of Stephen King that I can have on my shelf, that I can take down. I can look at some really nice illustrations. I can have that luxurious feeling. I have my Stephen King paperback collection, and I have all of his books in the same style. I like having them in paperback, but I'm tempted to get the Folio Society Shining. It depends on whether or not I've got the money. If I do, I will certainly review it. If not, that's fine too. But it's something I'm considering. For my classic read, I'm going to go Dickens. So, Charles Dickens, I've got a Charles Dickens leatherbound, and I want to read Oliver Twist, which is one, again, I've not read since I was a teenager. I'm tempted to maybe try and give Great Expectations a try, because it's also in the same leatherbound collector's collection. But I will end November. Sorry about that. I will end November with a read of A Christmas Carol, which will bring us into December with a nice Christmassy feel. For December, I'm going to go light. I don't want to be reading too much in December that's going to distract. So I'm going to stick to, as my classic read, something light, airy, easy to read. And I'm going to read, again, I have the leather-bound Canterbury Classics of this, Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, and Through the Looking Glass. I think that's going to be a nice and pleasant reading experience. It's going to take the pressure off for December. For the modern read, I'm going to jump in and read some Adrian Tchaikovsky, because Adrian Tchaikovsky is another one of those readers from that poll, the others being Ray Bradbury and Cormac McCarthy, that people said they were interested in hearing my take on. And I've not been able to read any Adrian Tchaikovsky, which is annoying. So I'm going to read Guns of the Dawn in December next year. Now, if I have time in between any of these books, I may put some other things in. I may try to put a couple of other Adrian Tchaikovsky books in throughout the year. There are a few others I'd like to read, like Cage of Souls and Dogs of War, that I've heard great things about. There are a few other books in general that I'd like to read, but I don't want to promise that I'm going to be reading stuff that I'm not going to find the time for. So these are the books that I'm planning to read over the next year. This is basically my big TBR, but it's not all I'm going to be doing over this next year. For 2022, I also want to make at least a few videos on video games as well. I want to make a kind of a deconstruction of video games, platformers specifically, 2D platformers, 3D platformers, because those are one of my big hobbies. That's my big love in video games is platforming, as you may know. But I also want to discuss some other video games. I want to go into a few games that are going to be the focus of my gameplay experience over the next year or so. Those games are going to be the Horizon Zero Dawn and Horizon Forbidden West games. So the Horizon series as a whole. I want to go into Elden Ring, which I'm really looking forward to playing, and I want to see what I think of it. I'm going to give it a fair chance. I'm not a fan of Dark Souls, as people will be well aware, and I have very, very mixed opinions on Bloodborne, which is another one I may touch on while I'm talking about Elden Ring. I also want to go back to two of my favourites, and that is the original Last of Us, although I'll be using The Last of Us Remastered on PS4 for that, and DMC Devil May Cry. Yeah, that one, not the main series, DMC Devil May Cry, the one everyone ripped apart. I want to give that a little bit of a spotlight, because that is again one of my favourite games. So that's 4 games that I want to focus on, 5 I suppose, because there's 2 Horizon games in there. I would also kind of like to touch on The Division 1 and 2, as I want to discuss how the Tom Clancy games are playing on the name Tom Clancy, and how whether or not they're doing his legacy justice. But I may wait until 2023 to do that, because I'd also like to discuss Tom Clancy books whilst I'm doing that. So that's something I'm not sure where I'll fit that in. That may be a next year thing. But that's my plan overall. I've got a few things I want to go into. I've got 4 big gaming topics: Horizon, Elden Ring, The Last of Us, and DMC as my big topics, my big game focus. Those are the 4 games. Well, there's more than 4 games. You get my idea. Those are the games I want to focus on. I would also ideally like to potentially go for platinum trophies in some of these. The Last of Us Remastered has been a game that I've been wanting to get the platinum trophy in for a long time. I'd love to get the DMC platinum trophy, but it does require you to play on some of the really ridiculous difficulties. I have no idea if the platinum trophy for Elden Ring or Horizon Forbidden West are going to be easily achievable. I already have the platinum for Horizon Zero Dawn, so that's one I can't go for. But I haven't finished the DLC, so I would like to discuss that. So those games are going to be the focus of my gaming for the next year. I do want to make at least a couple of videos discussing platformers. Platformers I consider separate from like mainstream AAA gaming. So when I discuss platformers, I consider it to be a new medium. In the same way as far as I'm concerned, there's mainstream AAA video games, there's books, there's TV shows, there's films, and there's platformers. They're a separate thing. They're practically like music in my head. Because they don't play the same way. They're not focused on the same gameplay structures. They're much more about the flow and the minute-to-minute gameplay. The narrative is largely unimportant, and they can be quite cartoonish and absurdist in ways that most narrative-driven games simply can't. So those are some things I want to focus on. I might discuss films and TV shows when I've got a little bit of downtime. That may be something that I'll go into. I'm going to be spending a bit of time at the cinema every now and then, and film reviews are easy and simple and very quick to get out there if I'm just doing a first thoughts, not like a full edited breakdown of the film or anything. But those are my plans for 2022. It's going to be a lot of reading. It's going to be a dive into some classics, though notice that when I say classics, a lot of those classics are not what people would think of as the big canonical classics. I've got a few with Wuthering Heights and Moby Dick and Charles Dickens in there, but a lot of them are the lesser considered classics. Things like George Orwell's 1984 and the Foundation trilogy, Master and Margarita. These are things that no one's going to argue aren't classics, but they're not the immediate the immediate thing when you think classics. We're not going through things like Pride and Prejudice or Middlemarch. I haven't touched on any of the Russian classics. There's no Tolstoy, there's no Dostoevsky, anything like that in there. I do want to read all of those books, but I want to read them at a later time. I want to focus on these books at the moment, and maybe in 2023 we can look at some of the other classics out there. And there's also some big series, big fantasy and sci-fi series that I'd love to look into as well, that I just don't have the time for. There's no Sanderson on my list. I have books by Robert Hobb. There's no Robert Hobb on this list. I don't have any room to finish the Powder Mage trilogy, or to look at anything by Christopher Riocchio. His Sun Eater series, which was one I was really interested in. There's just not enough time, and there's not enough hours in the day to read everything I want to read. So this is what I'm focusing on at the moment. If I can fit in more, I will. But I'm aware that trying to fit in more than 2 main reads per month is asking too much of myself. And it's probably asking too much of someone who's casually watching along, because you're going to have reading plans of your own. You're going to have other readathons and read-alongs and things like that you might want to take part in. You're going to have your own desires on what reads you find interesting, that you want to pick up and read because it's what you're reading. And that's fine. But if you want to read along, what I'm planning on reading is easily in the grasp of anyone else reading. If you spend just a couple of hours reading per day, you can easily read along every single book I have mentioned here today that I've shown, because I'm going to stick pictures of the books here. Everyone I've shown here, you can read along with me, and that's going to be great. If you want to discuss them in the comments section or discuss them in Discord with me, read along and have a nice, almost like a book club read along, then that's going to be great. I'm going to basically treat every book that I've mentioned here as the official buddy reads of my Discord, even if no one's really buddy reading them with me. That way you already know what to expect each month. You can go in going, this is what TC is reading on this day. And you know that at least one person is going to be there reading along with you, and you'll have someone to chat about the books with. So hopefully this has been entertaining. I've been rambling for almost an entire hour. I've got almost no battery and almost no memory card left, so I'm going to have to stop here. But thanks for listening, and hopefully this sounds like a fascinating and interesting 2022 to come. My reviews, by the way, are going to be more structured because I'm going to be using my tablet. I'm scripting my reviews from now on because I'm aware that my reviews are too long. My reviews were 20 to 30 minutes long, and that's too long. So I want to restructure the way I'm doing reviews. I'm still going to deep dive, I'm still going to do some analysis, but I'm going to write my reviews down, and I'm going to read them from a script. It's going to be a different take on them. I'm going to still ad-lib a little bit. I'm not going to stick to the script word for word, but I'm also going to set myself a word limit. I want to make sure that I can review every single book that I review in under 1,500 words, which is a much bigger limit than you would get if you were writing a review for a review column, which is only usually about 600 to 800 words. I'm giving myself double that. But I think it's going to be good. I think it's going to make succinct, more detailed reviews. It'll mean I'll have to actually put some work into making them well-written works of prose in their own right. So, come 2022, my reviews, my individual book reviews, are going to be something different. They're not going to be as rambly as these videos. Now, where this is completely unscripted. This whole video was off the cuff, one take to the camera, as I'm sure you can tell. I'll edit out the odd but other than that, it's pretty much one take straight to the camera. My reviews need to not be that. I need them to be evergreen. I want them to be something I can look back on and go, that took some effort and skill to put together. So I'm going to aim to do that. Hopefully you'll find it entertaining and interesting, and I'll see you guys very soon. Thanks for watching. Bye.